Good morning. This is Sangeetha Manoj from the Department of Management Studies, BBA Shift 1, presenting you to the topic Research Process from the subject Research Methodology. Let's see what is a research process. Research process is a set of multiple scientific techniques and steps that are involved in the research work. It starts with problem identification and formulation and then moves on sequentially. Let's see the snapshot of the research process. Step 1, formulating the research problem. Step 2, extensive literature survey. Step 3, development of working hypothesis. Step 4, preparation of the research design. Step 5, determining the sample design. Step 6, collecting the data. Step 7, execution of the project. Step 8, analysis of data. Step 9, hypothesis testing. Step 10, generalization and interpretation. And step 11, preparation of the report or the thesis. Now, the whole snapshot of the research process is depicted in the flow chart here, starting from the definition of the research problem and up to the interpretation and report writing. Now, to see the research process in detail, the first step is formulating the research problem. Formulation of research problem has to be done in consultation with colleagues, experts in the subject, other teachers, friends, etc. The most important consideration we have to give while formulating a research problem is that we have to be making it practical, relatively important, feasible, ethically and politically acceptable. The second step is extensive literature survey. Extensive literature survey means the already existing articles which are available in the library or the government published records and reports or the academic journals have to be completely perused to understand what researches have been done in the yesteryears in the topic. This will give an idea to the researcher about the coherence of his research and the results with that of the report of the others. Basically, it helps in identification of the research gap. This was the step 2. Step 3 talks about the development of the hypothesis. Now, what is this hypothesis? Hypothesis is a tentative assumption that the researcher makes in order to find out whether it is correct or not, thereby making an attempt to prove or disprove the hypothesis. Now, the hypothesis must be very clear and it should be limited to the piece of research that is being undertaken. The hypotheses are basically of two types. First one being the null hypothesis, which is represented as H0, which is basically a negative statement in which there is a difference of mean that is being assumed in two different types of data. The second one is the alternate hypothesis, which is the opposite of the null hypothesis. The acceptance or the rejection of hypothesis is basically on the level of significance which moves either which is accepted by the researcher as 0.05 or 0.01. The next step is the preparation of the research design. Research design is the conceptual structure in which the research is to be conducted. This will include the means of obtaining the information, the capability of the researcher, the explanation in which the information is to be sought, the time available for the research, and the cost of the research. The step 5 is talking about the sample design. Now, what is a sample? A sample is a representative group which is chosen out of the population, that is the whole, to have all the characteristics of the population and which will be used for the study. The sampling methods are to be decided by the researcher. Basically, there are two types of sampling methods: probability sampling, non-probability sampling. When each and every unit in the sample has equal probability of or chance of getting selected in the sample, we call it as probability sampling. There are various techniques, namely simple random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, area sampling, etc. Non-probability techniques are where the researcher uses his own discretion to decide the sample, and here the chances or the probability of each of the sampling unit to be selected is not there. The examples of non-probability sampling are judgmental sampling, convenience sampling, snowball sampling, deliberate sampling, etc. The step 6 is collecting the data. There are basically two types of data that is to be collected in research. Primary data, which is the first-hand information. The tools used for collecting these are questionnaire, interview schedule, observation, pantry audit, consumer panel, etc. The second type of data is the secondary data, which is already in existence and which need to be culled out according to the basic discipline and the area of research by the researcher. The books, journals, the government census, the internet, statistical directory are some of the examples. Step 7 talks about the execution of the project, the systematic manner and the timely manner in which the research has to happen, and depending upon the adequacy and the availability of the data, the execution of the project happens. It can happen only if the data is adequate and it is dependable. Step 8 talks about analysis of data. Analysis of data has various steps encompassed in it. These are data editing, data coding, data classification, data tabulation, data presentation, and data measurement. Step 9 talks about hypothesis testing. Hypothesis testing is a formal procedure of investigating the hypothesis using some statistical tool. The 5 main steps in hypothesis testing is: first, frame the research hypothesis, both the null hypothesis and the alternate hypothesis, that is H0 and H1. Second, collect the data which is pertaining to the hypothesis. Third, perform the appropriate statistical test. Fourth, decide whether to accept or reject the hypothesis. And the last, present the findings. Step 10, generalization and interpretation. Generalization is a technique where, as a result of hypothesis testing, we try to build a theory based on that. Whereas interpretation is, hypothesis is not the basis for start, but in the course of the research work, we try to further do some more researches into identifying how the interpreted data can be used for further researches. Step 11 and the last step is preparation of the research report or the thesis. Basically, a report has 3 parts. The first one is a preliminary page which has title, date, acknowledgement, forward, and table of contents. The second part of the research report is the main text, which will have the introduction to the research topic, the main report which has a research methodology, the sampling design. The third one is a summary of the findings, which is as a result of the hypothesis testing, which will also include the descriptives. And the last one is the conclusion. The conclusion also paves way for further researches that can be done. The third part of the research report is the end matter, which has the appendices and the bibliography. That means all the references which we have used for the review of literature. Thank you.